Greetings, brothers and sisters. We are going to discuss more on the wisdom of Elohim. Now, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, for without them it is impossible to discern things of the Spirit. And for those who are awake, we can start to see that things are far deeper than we can even begin to imagine. I'll talk about keeping covenant and why is this a very serious matter and why is it important. And let's not forget those heavenly commandments, those instructions on how we were to live upon the earth. Now they are the only words that were written personally by the Creator, meaning coming directly to us from Him. So they are very dear to the Creator and very vital and key, and it's important for us to give consideration to them. Now it was the Messiah who confirmed this new covenant spoken of in Jeremiah. Now remember, it is the same covenant with these 10 commandments that were given to the Israelites. Now he found fault with the first covenant, and the fault was with the people. Now those 2 tablets of stone symbolized the hardness of their hearts. And he said he was going to bring a new covenant where we would put those same laws in our hearts and our minds. And this covenant we see is with the house of Israel and Judah. Now let's not forget that those 10 lost tribes of Israel were scattered and given into captivity in Babylon, which we are told is a mystery, and she's called Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots. Well, we see in the end, what do we observe? Well, he is calling these people out of Babylon, just like he did in Egypt. Now we are that spiritual seed of Abraham, and it is through Messiah these promises have come, and he has been uniting these 2 houses into one olive tree. Now, how do we know for certain that we have come to know him? This is a very important question. We're going to talk more on that later. Now also recognizing we're at the time of the end, and the books are being unsealed, and I'm referring to those prophecies written within Daniel about the beast kingdoms and what would become of them. And we see they're talking about past, present, and future, and they're being fulfilled in our times. Now also, what is the meaning of this Shabbat, the Shabbat Rest? And we are warned in Hebrews to make every effort to enter and not fall by following the same pattern of disobedience. Now wisdom tells us whatever has been will be again. There is nothing new under the sun. And also, you will recognize them by their fruits. Remember those 2 trees in the garden? Well, it started with those 2 trees in the garden, and it ends with 2 types of trees. Learn what this means. Then finally, let's reflect on the meaning of the wise and the foolish. Now that Hebrew word for foolish is the word evil, the same word in connotation as we have in the English language, the crossover. Now this word means somebody lacking, who's senseless, who is lacking knowledge and understanding. Well, we will let the word of truth answer these matters for us. Let's begin with what our Master taught us when he responded to this following question. Thou shalt love Jehovah Elohim with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. He said this is the first and greatest commandment. And he said the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, understanding that there are 2 divisions of the commandments, they were split into 2 tablets of stone, and 5 are specific in dealing with our relationship and the Creator, and the other 5 were to deal with our neighbors, what we should observe and do unto our neighbors. So our Master responded very wisely when he made this distinction. And wisdom teaches us this. In Sirach chapter 28 verse 7, it states to remember the commandments and do not be angry with your neighbor. You see, that was the commandments towards our neighbor. And it says remember the covenant of the Most High and overlook faults. So we see there is the remembering of the commandments, but there is also this covenant that is connected with them. And we'll talk more on this a little bit later. We can see that our Master is very wise and understands that love is the key to keeping the commandments, and most importantly, his covenant. Now, if we do as our Master states, and to love the Creator and to love our neighbors, then we will not do anything that would upset them, such as breaking the Creator's commandments, which are all these wisdom, and they are conditions of the covenant. Now James chapter 2 verse 10 teaches us, for whoever keeps the whole Torah and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. So by stumbling just at one point, and I'm just going to use the fourth commandment, the Sabbath, for example, the Shabbat Rest, he was commanded to remember this. And this is exactly the point here. We'll speak more on this a bit later. Now, in the Word, we read the following. Colossians chapter 1, verse 28. Whom we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Yeshua the Messiah. So we are to take this warning, and the key here is that wisdom makes every man perfect, and it is wisdom that is the mother of knowledge and understanding. And we know that Yeshua is Elohim's wisdom. Now wisdom has everything to do with perfection of man, because it is wisdom that teaches us the things that are good and that we should observe when we deal with the Creator. Therefore, it's our responsibility to take these matters to heart. Now, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15 states the following: study to show thyself approved unto Elohim, a workman that needed not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now, we are to study the word, and we are to rightly divide the word, and this is our responsibility, and we are to grow in this knowledge and understanding. Now, to rightly divide the word of truth, we need to use discernment, which comes through the Spirit. Now, the word itself explains itself very clearly, because wisdom is hidden within the word, and wisdom is incorruptible. And it is through this symbolism that this knowledge reveals its mysteries. And Isaiah chapter 28 verse 10 proceeds to teach us this also, because it says, for in verse 10 it says, for a precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. So in other words, the whole of the Torah, both the Old and New Covenants combined, have all this knowledge and wisdom that we are to build upon and to grow. Now, this means not taking the word out of context or teach the traditions of men, so that we may be able to distinguish light from darkness, truth from lies, clean from unclean, the wise versus foolish behavior, and so on. Now that we have covered some elementary truths, let's take a look in the book of Daniel, and we're going into chapter 12, verse 9. Now, Daniel in Hebrew means Elohim is my judge. In verse 9 we read, and he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And blessed is he that waited and cometh to the 1,335 days. But go thou way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of days. Now, what do we observe here? Well, these words are speaking about the time of the end. And this coincides with the end of the age of Pisces. Now, in this chapter 12, which talks about the time of the end, and we have Pisces, which is the 12th sign, which is also a sign of the end, a time of the fisher of men, saving souls for the kingdom. Now, we see that the words could not be understood. They were sealed until the time of the end. And we're talking about all these prophecies spoken of in Daniel, and also the seals are being spoken of, and the mysteries and the prophecies within the book of Revelation are being unsealed in our times. Now this is the time when many will awaken, a time of revealing the truths of the world, a time of returning to the ancient paths, and a time to come out of Babylon, this corrupt world that has deceived and enslaved humanity through its lies and deceptions. Now, has this not been the case in these times? So much truth being revealed, corruptions being exposed, as the word states it would be. Now, these words are speaking to the awakened ones, and we should pay close attention. And it is a time where we are going to be refined and cleansed of this corruption, so that we are found worthy to be among those who are found written in the book of life. Now, what is quite amazing is that we're told that the wise shall understand, but the wicked will not. Now we observe there are so many who do not understand what is going on at this time. They do not know the seals are breaking, and the 4 horses of the apocalypse are about to strike together very soon. And this will be devastating to humanity. In this prophecy, it gives us also a timeline and a clue as to do with the setting up of the abomination of desolation. Now, for those awakened ones, we know we are speaking about the mark of the beast, and we see that it is in full force, and it is making its authority known. We know that the temple is our body and mind, where the set-apart spirit resides. Now think what they are doing to humanity. They are implanting and operating in a communication system directly within our bodies. Well, not my body. And through the nanotechnology, they will have access to control and enslave your mind. Let's not forget, this is CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, the ability to alter and modify humankind. Now, what could be more abominable than these things, brothers and sisters? Without this technology and your DNA being your identity, you will not, as the Creator has stated, be able to buy or sell, because they want to take us to the 4th Industrial Revolution, and it is all digital, and it is all based on blockchain technologies. Now also, there is a timeline discussed in these passages to do with the setting up of the abomination. Now, America, the head of the beast and the leader. And when we consider that this is speaking about the mark of the beast, was it Operation Warp Speed, which officially announced on the 15th of May 2022, the setting up of this? And has not all nations followed suit? This is just an estimate. And if we were to add the 1,290 days spoken of here in Daniel, it would roughly take us to the year 2023, November. Then adding this additional 45 days, which would then take us roughly to the year 2024, January. Now these are just speculation and estimates on my behalf. Now this really does coincide with the elite's plans for those years, and things will certainly be in a very, very bad state when we consider the food crisis that's about to hit, the wars that are coming, and the chaos that will ensue, and fundamentally the breakdown of society. Now, we are told that blessed are the ones who last that long, because it's going to be very difficult to last very into the coming years with what's coming down the pipeline. Now, could this be speaking of those days? Because we are told, right, it states in the word that if those days had not been cut short, then no flesh would remain. And that's Matthew 24, verse 22. Especially when we consider that these words are speaking about the time of the end, my spirit seems to agree with this, as these days are so in line with these prophecies. Now was also very prophetic in what I've come across recently in such events as what the Department of Health and Human Services in the U.S. announced, a $1.7 trillion program that will include a vaccines for adults program, a new mandatory program modeled after the existing vaccines for children program. Chapter 12, verse 2, it states that some will awaken to everlasting life, and some to reproaches and everlasting abhorrence, because they have despised the ways of the Lord. We're going to read some very powerful words of the Messiah, who is all wisdom. Now, Messiah stated that love is the keeping of the commandments, and this is confirmed in his word. And bear in mind, when we read the word, we're not meant to turn away and forget what we read. We're meant to put into practice what we read. So think of John chapter 12:48 teaches, there is a judge for the one who rejects me and does not accept my words. And the words are what is written down within the covenant. It says that those very words I have spoken will condemn them at the last day. So let's keep that in mind. Now, reading John chapter 14 verse 15, this is what it states. If you love me, you shall guard my commandments. And that word there, Hebrew, shamar, means to guard with a passion, to uphold them. And then it states, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. The Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. So this is speaking about the context of the commandments, and it's to do with guarding them. But we only guard them if we love the Creator and we love Yeshua. Now also it's confirmed in 1 John chapter 2 verse 3. It says, and by this we know that we know him, if we guard his commands. So think about this. First it said, if you love me, you would guard them. And then it teaches that, hey, if you know him, right, you can know that you've come to know him if you guard his commandments. And then verse 4 teaches, the one who says, I know him, and does not guard his commands, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever guards his word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. By this we know that we are in him. So this is how we need to measure ourselves. And this is how the Creator says we know him, is if we obey him and keep his commands. Now the one who says he stays in him ought to himself also to walk even as he walked. Brethren, I write no new commandment to you, but an old commandment which you have had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word which you heard from the very beginning. Because you see, think about it, the commandments have been there from the very beginning when the Creator gave them to mankind. But mankind has not guarded these commandments. And the word is very clear. Those who guard his commandments know him, but those who do not guard his commandments are liars. Just like the prince of this world, who was a liar from the very beginning, and there was no truth found in him. Now, is it any wonder, brothers and sisters, what it states in Matthew chapter 7, verse 22? Many shall say to me on that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness or iniquity. Now what do we observe here, brothers and sisters? Well, what did they do wrong? Because this is speaking to those people in the end, and it is speaking about those believers. Right? We see they prophesied, they cast out demons, and they did many works. So they look like from the surface, from the outside, they are doing what the word they think is right in the word, what the Creator wants them to do. But he says, I never knew them. Now, that word iniquity in the Greek is anomia, which literally means to transgress the law. Now, this law it is referring to here has always been the Ten Commandments. And did he not teach us in Deuteronomy chapter 6:25? And if we are careful to obey. So careful means we need to guard and observe all this Torah before Jehovah our Elohim as he had commanded us. He said that will be our righteousness. So keeping his commandments is how we are determined righteous. Now, The old covenant is the new covenant concealed, and the new covenant is the old covenant revealed. Now, is there any surprise, brothers? We have more words of wisdom. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 14, it says that many are called, but a few are chosen. That means not everyone is chosen. So the ones who are chosen, you got to ask yourself, what are they doing differently to the ones that are not called? Why? Now, what did they do differently? I think is a very important question we need to ask ourselves, because not everyone who confesses to be a follower of Messiah gets into the kingdom. Now, Matthew chapter 7 verse 2 also speaks of this. It says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, or Master, Master, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father. And it was the Father who personally gave the commandments and wrote them with his own finger. That's how important they are. Because we were told in Matthew chapter 7 verse 13, it says, enter in through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter in through it. Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to life. And here we have again, and there are a few who find it. Not everyone finds it. And just remember, brothers and sisters, Romans chapter 3 verse 19, what does it state? Well, we know that whatever the Torah says, it speaks to those who are under the Torah, so that every mouth may be silenced. Now, brothers and sisters, I mentioned about that day of rest spoken of in his word. And this goes back to the wilderness, and whatever has been will be again. Now, in Hebrews chapter 4, we'll pick up in verse 9. There remains then a Shabbat Rest for the people of Elohim, a Sabbath rest. For anyone who enters Elohim's rest also rests from their works, just as Elohim did from his. Now this has a mystery, and it's to do with the seventh day, but also the fourth day, the fourth commandment, which is to do with remembering the Sabbath day, the day of rest. And it says in verse 11, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Now there's a mystery here, but this is speaking to those covenant keepers, and it is speaking to those people who observe the Sabbath rest, because you're going to see that it's very important. Now, let's observe. This is speaking, obviously, at the fourth commandment, and that was the commandment we were to remember and not to forget about. But also, this symbolizes the seventh-day rest and the completion and perfection of all things, his wisdom. Now, it is very clear Elohim rested, meaning that when he's finished the creation process, right, in the end of that sixth day, coming into that seventh day, the millennium time, well, that's when the works are fully completed. So it's talking about past, present, and future. And we see that he's called out this day of rest for a reason, because it's to do with obedience. And we are meant to observe it, because you see, he's wise, and he knows that mankind is going to see this as the least commandment and forget it. But you see, hidden in his wisdom there is those who honor that day and keep it will be given the right to enter the kingdom. And also, it is the fourth commandment that has the seal, the king's seal, upon the people. And in Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 12, it states, and I also give them my Shabbats as a sign between us, so they would know that I, Jehovah, made them set apart. Now, do you think that the Creator has forgotten these commandments and his covenant with mankind and changes his mind like a man? Now, this is merely a human argument. Now, Joshua chapter 21 verse 45 states, not one of all Jehovah's good promises to Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled. So when the Creator speaks something into existence and he makes an agreement, he never changes that agreement. Mankind change it, but the Creator keeps it. And that's an amazing thing about the Creator. He is true to his word. Now we see that they never entered that day of rest in the wilderness because of what? Their disobedience. So he has another day set apart, and that is his wisdom. Now, meaning those rejecting the commandments and not guarding them as commanded, and specifically remembering the Sabbath rest. Now, understanding that it was one commandment that lost the kingdom to Adam and Eve. And in like manner, it is also one commandment that when we honor and keep, grants us the right to enter that true day of rest, symbolized as the seventh day, which is all about completion and perfection, and also entering into paradise. But we see, brothers and sisters, you will not enter if you are disobedient and reject the Creator's commandments, which are all his wisdom. Now, brothers, let's look at some more of his amazing wisdom. We're told we would recognize them by their fruits. Now remember those 2 trees in the garden. Well, it started with 2 trees in the garden. And we'll observe that it ends with 2 types of trees. Now, what's quite amazing when we observe this, well, that tree of life was removed from the people. That tree of life symbolizes immortality, and also Yeshua, the Spirit of truth, Satan, a liar and deceiver. And we are told we cannot serve 2 masters. So let's read what it states in Matthew chapter 7, verse 16. It says, "By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them." So you see, it's talking about 2 types of trees here. One has good fruit, and the other one has bad fruit. And we're meant to observe these trees. Imagine you got one tree that has, let's say, GMO type of crops on there, like fruit, and they look ugly and they're not very pleasant and don't taste good. But then you have another tree that has beautiful fruit on it and it tastes brilliant. Well, this is the analogy. We have something that is good and something that is bad. One thing you can eat, the other one you cannot. Now the word tells us itself how we can recognize them. And this is the fruit it is referring to. Now in Galatians chapter 5, let's read verse 22 and pay attention to these words. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." These are the fruits we are meant to have. And it is through the Spirit. It will, remember, when we're born again, we're meant to renew our minds, and we're meant to grow, and we're meant to produce this fruit. And it says, against such things, there's no Torah. Because you see, if we are operating like this towards one another. Now remember what Messiah said? He said, the 2 greatest commandments? Well, the first one was to love the Creator with all your heart, all your soul. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Because love is the fulfillment of the law and his wisdom. Meaning that if you have this fruit, you are free from all restrictions because you are perfect. Now Matthew chapter 3 warns us. It says, "The axe is already at the root of the trees, and every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire." So brothers and sisters, we have to observe this fruit in one another, because this is how we're going to be measured. And it's going to be what determines which tree is cut down and which tree will inherit immortality. Now brothers, let's finish up with the wise and the foolish builders. You see, there were those 10 virgins, 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. Well, you see, what this is speaking about is those covenant believers, those covenant keepers. Now, we'll read Matthew chapter 7, and that word Matthew in the Hebrew, Mattiyahu, means the gift of Jehovah. Now in verse 24, it states this: therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But whoever hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. So you see, the foundation is the rock. And once you have this foundation, it doesn't matter what comes, what storm, what calamity, you see, this house will still stand because it has a strong foundation. Now let's learn from Israel's past. In 1 Corinthians, it talks about this in chapter 10. And it states, and did all drink the same spiritual drink? And it's speaking about the wilderness journey here. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Messiah. So think about this. You see, what we observe in the first Exodus, the Creator brought them out of Egypt and took them on a wilderness journey to teach them his wisdom. He was taking Egypt, not only taking them out of Egypt, but taking Egypt out of them. Now we see in like manner, in the end, there is the wilderness journey. And this time he is calling his people out of Babylon. Now, we see, just like in the wilderness journey in the past, they never entered that day of rest, because Elohim was not pleased with most of them. Their bodies were scattered in the wilderness, all because of disobedience. Now remember, brothers, this is the same spiritual rock that was with them in the wilderness journey in ancient times, and it's the same spirit and the same rock we are following today. Now we know, brothers and sisters, Yeshua the Messiah is the same yesterday and today and forever, meaning he does not change his mind like man. He keeps his covenant and is consistent through all time. Now, brothers and sisters, we'll finish up with these words. Yeshua therefore said to the Jews that had believed in him, if ye abide in my word, then you are truly my Talmudim, my disciples. And he stated, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now those words are powerful, because when you understand that it is all wisdom, and it is all knowledge, and it gives you understanding. Now also, he states the following, for I will give you words and wisdom. And this is in Luke chapter 21, verse 15. For I'll give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict, because the word is all wisdom, and wisdom is powerful.